Hi friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you all of the books that I read in February. So in the month of February, my reading was a lot more slowed down than usual. If you've watched any of my recent videos, you will know that I have been suffering with a bit of a neck injury. It occurred literally on like the 1st of February, so for the first 2 weeks I was really struggling to actually read anything because I couldn't hold my head up to be able to actually read. So it's a bit of a slower month for me than usual. So I've got 12 books I read in February, which is a lot less than my usual count, but I'm actually quite pleased with this amount considering the fact that I had a neck injury, and at the start of the month I was sort of thinking that I would be doing this wrap up with like 3 books read or something. So I'm pretty happy with 12 books. It feels like a big achievement when you consider everything that my head and neck have been going through. So yeah, I read 12 books and I had 2 5-star reads. I did read my most anticipated release of the year as well, which I was expecting to be a 5-star read but wasn't quite there, but not every book can be 5 stars. So let's just get straight into the books I read. We're starting off the month with a brand new favourite for me, which was A Deal with the Elf King by Elise Cover. This I gave 4 stars, but I love this. I had such a fun time and I've actually just ordered the whole series to read because I just want to binge it, and there's apparently going to be a 6th book in the series coming out at some point in the future, so I want to try and get ahead and catch up before that comes out. But I just had such a good time. I was not expecting to enjoy this as much as I did. I wasn't expecting it to be kind of as silly goofy as it was either, but this was so much fun. I don't know if it was just the mood that I was in and the consideration of my injury, but I loved that this wasn't super angsty. I think a lot of people in the reviews I've seen of this book were sort of saying that the stakes weren't high enough or that not enough kind of action was happening, but I love that. I love that it was kind of light-hearted and that I wasn't really worrying about if anyone was gonna die because it was just a fun time, and I think it was just what I needed at that time. So I'm really glad that I picked this up when I did. This is kind of just like a straightforward fantasy romance. There's no big villain overhanging everything. It's just 2 people who are trying to save their worlds coming together in this like almost a marriage of convenience, I guess. It's like an arranged marriage almost, and maybe they fall in love along the way. And I would recommend the series to everybody if you're looking for something that is just gonna transport you to a different world and just take you away from the stresses of everyday life. I think this series is, or at least the first book, A Deal with the Elf King, is a great way to go. I'm really excited as well to see how the world building expands as the books go on, because obviously this one has a kingdom of elves, but there's also fae in this world. There's vampires, sirens, werewolves, so I'm really excited to see how the author tackles different sort of fantasy species. And I also loved our main character Luella. She was so determined and headstrong, and she was really great to read from. So I'm really excited to see where this series is going to go, and hopefully I'll continue to love it. And I just know this is a series I'm going to end up picking up when I just need a bit of a cheer up, you know, just something easy and light-hearted to read. This is what I'm going to end up going for. I then read Vendetta by Catherine Doyle. This was a 3-star read for me. This is the start of a trilogy of mafia romances, which is not anything I've read before, and I got this on NetGalley and I was just like, you know what, I'll give it a go, because I've read the Twin Crowns series which Catherine Doyle co-writes and I really love that series. So I was hoping that with this, I think it's like a updated versions of the series, they were released in like the 2010s originally. I was hoping that I would end up really enjoying this, but it wasn't really for me necessarily. I think mafia romances probably aren't for me based on this. I don't think I would be continuing with the series just because the main character was so annoying. The main character Sophie genuinely needs to have a word with herself because her priorities are so messed up. She doesn't listen to anyone's advice to stay away from this mysterious family who's just moved into this abandoned house on the edge of town, and everyone in her life is telling her, don't go near them, don't go near the house, don't speak to these people, like just don't do it, they're trouble. And she just constantly goes and speaks to them and goes to their house, and I'm just like, girl, everyone's telling you this for a reason. Like, she's stubborn to the point of being really annoying, and I just couldn't get along with her. I did like that there was such a strong female friendship in this book, although it was a bit weird to be reading, because her best friend is called Millie, and so it was a bit weird to be constantly reading about a character called Millie and her actions, because there's not really many Millies in books normally. And I really like that the friendship aspect didn't waver, considering that this was originally written in the 2010s when female friendships were kind of always pushed to the side. I feel like when, you know, like Pretty Little Liars was around and all of that, like you had toxic female friendships in media at the time. So I'm quite surprised that such a strong female friendship did continue on throughout this book. Obviously, I don't know if it continues throughout the series or not, but at least for this book, I liked that it remained a steady plot point. I'm just not sure I'm going to continue with the series. I think if you like a kind of cheesy, easy read, then you can pick this up, but I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it. I don't really like the choices that our main character made. I then had my first 5-star read of the month, and also my first 5-star read since the start of January, so I was so happy to finally find one, and it was The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. This is the absolutely stunning Fairy Loot edition, and I'm so lucky that I got to go to a Fairy Loot event with the author and get my book signed, and this is actually a copy that they were giving out at the event. So when my copy that I'd ordered with the YA box arrives, because obviously I didn't know I was going to this event before I ordered that box, I will be doing a giveaway for non-personalised edition of this, so you can keep an eye out on my Instagram for that. But The Rose Bargain was just incredible. This is like Regency fantasy, there's fae, there's bargains, and the vibes are just immaculate. It is so good. So in this world, you have a queen who 200 years before, I think, or maybe 400 years before, I think it was, defeated this battle that was going on. I can't remember what the battle was. What battle was it? 400 years before the start of this story, you have a queen who defeats and like stops the War of the Roses. So she ends up coming from the Fae realm to London and she becomes queen. 400 years later, there is a system in place where everyone in the UK can make a bargain with her to better their lives. You have one bargain for the rest of your life, and you might end up having to give up something in return that you don't necessarily want to lose. Could be a toe, or it could be all your childhood memories. So it's really up to the queen what she wants to take from you and whether you think it's worth what you're getting out of it. So you might bargain for a better singing voice, or to be better at sewing, or whatever. And we are following Ivy, whose family has fallen into disrepute after her sister made a bargain and it kind of ruined their lives, and she doesn't know what the sister's bargain was, and then her sister also goes missing but then is returned, and she ends up making a bargain so that she will try and win the heart of the Queen's son, Prince Bram. She's up against a number of other girls and she wants to do this so that her sister's reputation is no longer damaged, so that her family can live in peace and not worry about money so much. So I really liked the premise of this, and the vibes are just immaculate. Like, you have gardens and balls and fae and some weird trials going on, but it was so well written. I was just completely addicted to it. I just absolutely flew through it. And honestly, there is so much yearning in this book between Ivy and a certain someone, and it had me on the edge of my seat. I knew from the very first page that this book was going to be a new favourite for me, and I'm so glad that stayed true throughout the whole of the book. And then the ending, it is such a big cliffhanger. I had to reread a certain page multiple times to make sure that I was reading it right, because I was like, surely that has not just happened. I did not see the plot twist coming at all, and I desperately need book 2 now. And there's not even an announcement for it. There's not even a title. I'm scared for what's going to happen, but I'm also super excited. I would highly recommend this if you love a good fantasy, Regency romance, danger. So good. And that brings us to my second 5-star read of the month. So I had 2 5-star reads back to back, which is kind of unheard of for me, but I am so happy that this was a 5-star read. It's Deep End by Ali Hazel Hazelwood. She has done it again. I love Ali Hazelwood so much. If you've been here for a while, you know this. I just absolutely adore her. And this, Love Theoretically, is still, I think, my favourite book of hers, but this is a very, very, very close second. I immediately wanted to reread this after I finished it, which I think says everything. Like, I could not stop thinking about this. Anytime I wasn't reading this, I was thinking about it. Anytime that I had to put the book down, I was, when am I going to be picking this back up? And I finished it in less than 24 hours because I was just addicted. So good. So this is Ali Hazelwood's first, well, I guess kind of first, because Checkmate was about chess, which is technically a sport, but her first sports romance. You're following a competitive diver and a competitive swimmer. They're at the same college and they end up making like a kind of deal with each other, and the romance is everything. Ali Hazelwood heard the phrase "to be loved is to be known" and ran with it. This is the definition of that phrase, and it is just absolutely everything. I'm not a sports person, but I loved that this was about swimming and diving. They're like my favourite sports to watch whenever the Olympics is on or whatever. Like, they're the ones that I am invested in. So this was just speaking to me in every single way. And I really liked how she balanced the sports, like college background, with the romance. Each felt equally important, as well as the main character Scarlett's mental health. She goes to therapy throughout this book and is trying to overcome her fear of doing a certain dive after she was injured, and it's a really beautiful story of overcoming your fears and overcoming your trauma as well, because it also harkens back to her childhood trauma that she's been through. But the romance as well, like the tension, the pining, the chemistry, top tier. I just love Ali Hazelwood. I love Lucas and Scarlett. Lucas is absolutely a new book boyfriend. Give me 14 of them right now. Like, well done, Ali Hazelwood. Well done. I then read A Crown So Silver by Lyra Celine, which I gave 3 stars. This is the second book to A Feather So Black, and I will not be continuing on with the series after this. This definitely had middle book syndrome, and I just found myself just not caring enough to want to pick it up. Like, it took me a long time to read it. It didn't feel like there was any character development. There's certainly no chemistry between our main character and the love interest that was established in the first book. Like, it just felt kind of messy, and the plot took so long to get going, and even by the end I felt like we didn't have any real conclusion to any plot lines that were going on, so there was no real reason to have read this book really in order to read the third book, if that makes sense. And we really end up in pretty much the exact same place at the end of the second book that we were in at the end of the first book. Like, there's no moving on with the plot. Like, we were in the exact same situations, so I won't be continuing on with the series whenever the third book, which I can't remember what it's called, comes out. I then had a cute little 4-star read with Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. This is very short and sweet, and I just wanted something easier to kind of pick up, and this is it. This is whimsical, it's cute. It's not as good as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which is the first book, but I still had a good time. What I love about this world is just how baffling it is. Like, you can't really wrap your head around it. You have to just suspend your disbelief and just be like, yeah, sure, whatever is going on. Like, you're running in place and the world's not going anywhere, but you're running as fast as you can, and then you end up in the same place that you were and stuff. And like, it's just a fun time. It's whimsical, it's cute. I enjoy this world. I then had another 4-star read with Hedwig by Skye McKenna. This is a middle grade fantasy. It's the start of a 5-book series, and I'm very excited to continue because I really like the world building in this. So I did feel a little bit lost in the first third of the book, I want to say, because it kind of takes a while for the main character to get where she needs to go. But once she does, it's a world of this magical hedge and goblins and this like Fey realm as well that's on the other side of the hedge, and like learning to control your witch powers and develop them, and friendships and stuff, and it's just a really cute little time. It also felt very autumnal. This would be the perfect book to cozy up with when it's raining and it's cold outside and you've got a blanket on, and you know, it's just like a perfect October spooky season read that's just cozy. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I feel like the plot was well paced and the characters were really endearing. I also like that not only is Cassie trying to better herself as a witch, because she didn't even know she was one before arriving at Hedgley, but she's also on a quest to find her missing mother, and I really like how that kind of stays her main goal throughout the book. Like, I love how she didn't forget about the fact that that is her main true goal in life, is to track down what happened to her mother, and I feel like that's a really sweet story. So I'm very excited to continue with this series at some point. I then read my most anticipated release of the year, which of course was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I am so happy that I got to read this ahead of its release date. I'm so grateful to the publisher for sending me this gorgeous foiled proof. Like, it's literally the prettiest thing that I own and the most precious thing that I own. This unfortunately was not the 5-star read that I was expecting it to be, but it was a 4.5-star read, so it was very close. Just didn't quite hit that mark for me, but I still absolutely adore Emily Henry and her writing and the worlds that she creates, even though they are set in our world. I love that they feel so distinctive to her, so I'm really happy that I got to read this. This is a very different book from Emily Henry. This is far more literary fiction than romance compared to her other books. Her other books are still kind of more literary fiction than romance, but this one, I wouldn't even class it as a romance, I don't think. This is definitely just literary fiction. And you're following two writers, Alice and Hayden, who have both been offered the opportunity to write the biography of a lifetime. So Margaret Ives is an heiress who's disappeared from the public eye for 20 years, and now she's ready to tell her story, but they each have a month-long trial, and at the end of the month she will choose who she wants to write her story down. They can't share what they learn with each other as NDAs, but it's really the story of her life, and along the way they also have this chemistry between Alice and Hayden as well. And I really liked how Emily Henry approached this with a very different narrative structure to her other books. We have historical elements in this book as we kind of flash back to learning about Margaret Ives's whole story, going right the way back to her great-grandfather, and those elements were my absolute favourites. It's very reminiscent of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I absolutely adore, and it just felt very those kinds of vibes. Like, I just loved learning about this fictional crazy rich family. Like, it was really fascinating to read about, even though they're not real people. They felt very genuinely real, like this would be something that you could just Google and learn about. However, I think that because so much of the focus was on Margaret and her story, that the romance for me fell a little bit by the wayside. I think compared to Emily Henry's other romances that I adore, Beach Read and Happy Place and the others as well, like the romance just wasn't quite hitting as much for me. It felt like it was a bit too fast paced for me compared to the normal kind of build up of tension and chemistry that we get with her romances. But I still just absolutely adored this. It's very beautifully written. I mean, would you expect anything less from her? I was absolutely flying through the last few chapters, desperate to reveal the secrets that we were kind of being dotted sort of little snippets of along the way, and I just love her so much. I can't wait for everyone to read this when it releases and to uncover Margaret's story and the story of the whole Ives family. But yeah, it just, the only reason I've knocked off half a star is just because the romance wasn't quite hitting in the way that I wanted it to, but it's still a brilliant book, and I hope that she does more books like this, like with a kind of different approach to what she would usually do. Like, I just think it's a risk, but I think it paid off. I then read Bring Me Your Midnight by Rachel Griffin, which was a 3.5-star read for me. This is a YA fantasy and it's set on an island. There's witches, which Rachel Griffin's books are always about witches, so obviously you can expect that going into it. But these witches kind of have, all their magic is tied to the sea. So the sea that surrounds this island, they kind of imbue it with their magic, and in order to release the magic so that it doesn't kind of like burn them up from the inside or something, so they only can perform very low magic, is what it's called, like gentle spells, like creating perfumes or teas or whatever with like certain emotions in them. They can't really do anything more than that. And our main character is betrothed to, I can't remember who he is, but some guy on the mainland. In order to strengthen the alliance between the island and the mainland, and for the mainland to trust the island witches, she has to marry this guy. And he's nice enough, but one day she ends up running off before this ritual to put their magic into the sea can happen, and she stumbles across this guy on the island who she's never seen before, and he tells her that he can help her to strengthen her magic and to perform dark or high magic. And although I love the premise of this, it just didn't work for me. I really liked the atmosphere and the setting, and as well as the magic system, although I'm not sure it was ever fully properly explained, or at least I didn't understand it properly. I didn't like the romance aspect. Neither Landon, who's the mainland guy, or Wolf, who's the island guy, really captured me as love interests. Neither of them I wanted her to be with, and I think it would have worked a lot better actually if it had just focused on her friendships. So she had a really strong friendship with this girl, Ivy, and I think that if that had been kind of more of the main focus, along with her learning about her powers and stuff, then I would have enjoyed it more. The romance just felt really unnecessary. It was very quick and easy to read, but it honestly just felt a bit underdeveloped, so I'm just a bit disappointed. I then read Servant of Earth by Sarah Hawley, which I gave 3 stars. I was really expecting to love this. This is the start of a new trilogy from her, or a new series at least. She's the author of the Glimmer Falls trilogy, which I absolutely adore. I love that series so much. So I was really expecting to love this, but it just didn't work for me. This is a fae fantasy. You're following a girl called Kenna who is determined to get her friend away from the kind of villages where they live, because every 6 years 4 girls are sacrificed or like chosen to go and live in the Fae realms. It's meant to be an honour to do it, but Kenna is very suspicious of that, and then her friend is chosen. So Kenna decides to follow them through the woods and lead them on the way because she knows the woods better than anybody, and along the way they're attacked and stuff, and so Kenna ends up in the Fae realms herself, and she ends up being a kind of handmaiden, I guess you'd call it, to a Fae princess. And there's all these trials going on as well, and there's all this elemental magic, so there's all these houses of magic. So there's like Earth House, Blood House, Void House or something. I really enjoyed the world building and the magic system, and I did want to know what was going to happen, but the pacing felt very off. I couldn't connect with Kenna as a character. She just felt very distant and a bit flat for me. There was a plot twist at the very end that you could see coming from a mile off. The person who this plot twist revolved around was suspicious from the very beginning, and it was very obvious what was going to happen with that. I did appreciate that there was a sentient dagger in this. I thought that was really cool, and I am intrigued to read on, but this just felt very flat for me after the Glimmer Falls series by Sarah Hawley, so hopefully the next one is better. I then read Sweet Bean Paste by Jurin Tsukagawa. This is a translated Japanese fiction. It's only like 180 pages or something. It's short, it's sweet, it's wholesome, although not as wholesome as I have come to expect from Japanese translated literature. I'm thinking of like Before the Coffee Gets Cold and all of those kinds of ones. It didn't have that same kind of warmth to it that those other ones that I've enjoyed have. I think it also just didn't feel particularly engaging, and I think that's because I struggled with the main character whose perspective we were reading from. He was very ignorant and very self-centered all the time, and I just would have preferred to have read from one of the side characters' perspectives, like the young girl or the older woman. I would have much preferred to have read from theirs rather than his. But on the whole, it is a nice story about overcoming prejudices and sort of a kind of found family aspect and finding your place in the world. It was short and sweet. I then finished off the month with reading Sleep Like Death by Kalynn Bayron. This was, I don't know if I've decided on the rating yet, 3.5 star read for me, I think. That might change on my Goodreads at some point, but for now we'll go with a 3.5 star read. This is a Snow White retelling, so it's set, I believe, in the same world as Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron, and I really enjoyed Cinderella is Dead, although now that I think back on it, it's not as good as I thought it was at the time, but I believe it's set in the same world as Cinderella is Dead. But it is a Snow White retelling. You're following Princess Eve, who she lives in this land where there is a knight that kind of terrorizes the people by granting them wishes, but in return for their wishes being granted, it will not work out the way that they expect it to. So for example, her mother, or one of her mothers, made a wish that she wanted to have the most beautiful singing voice in all the land, and 3 days later, she turned into a bird. So the wishes never work out the way that you would expect them to, or the way that you would want them to, no matter how carefully you word what you say to this knight. And so Eve's other mother, which I can't remember what her name is, has basically been trying to protect the people, make their lives as best as she can so that they don't want to wish for anything. But one day, Eve finds out that her mother has been talking to a mysterious figure within a mirror called Nova, and Eve is determined to stop the knight's kind of plague of terror for her people. So she goes to the castle where he lives, determined to stop him, ends up getting injured and stuff, and she comes across this man who's got 7 sons and whatever, so you can see where the Snow White retelling is coming from, right? And this was very well written. I really like how Kalynn Bayron approaches fairy tale retellings. I think she adds in all the elements that you find as classic of these fairy tales, like the 7 dwarves and the magic mirror and all of that, but in a way that is very different. So I really find that aspect quite fun. But I just was never that engaged with Eve as a main character, and there's also a romance in here that I'm not sure was necessary. I feel like the book would have been just as strong had the romance not happened. It didn't really add anything to the story for me, so I wasn't really sure why that was included. But I really like Kalynn Bayron's writing style. It just wasn't the most engaging book. It didn't keep me wanting to keep turning the page, if you know what I mean. So, but it was very easy to read, very quick and easy to read. It was okay. So those are the 12 books that I read in February. I'm hoping to have a better reading month in March. I've put up my March TBR, which you can go and check out, and I'm feeling really positive about the books that are on my March TBR. Obviously I'm a mood reader, so whether I stick to the March TBR is another question, but I am really positive about hopefully reading a bit more, hopefully enjoying what I'm reading a bit more. I'm not putting any pressure on myself in terms of numbers this month, or trying not to anyway, because of my neck injury. It's still ongoing, very annoyingly, but hopefully as March goes on, my neck and head will get stronger, and so will my reading abilities. So we'll see. I also have a very fun thing planned at the start of March. I'm going to see Gracie Abrams with one of my friends, so I'm very excited for that. So you probably won't get much reading done that day, but we'll see. So yeah, I'm really excited about what reading I'm going to be doing in March, and I'm really happy with what I did read in February. I read some of my most anticipated releases, 2 5-star reads. It was an overall good reading month, so I'm very happy about that. So let me know in the comments what your favourite book that you read in February was, and if you've read any of the books that I read, what did you think of them as well? If you'd like to follow me on my Goodreads or on my Bookstagram, the links will be down in the description below. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!